Sometimes life hurts us so much we forget what it's like to feel okay again. Sometimes we feel so alone we think that's all we're worth. In Red Hollow, two sad people are about to learn that getting better isn't always easy. Silas Wade is a big guy, tough from war and years of fighting. Miss Lillian Grace is a teacher who lost her husband and moved west to forget her past, but people in town are mean to her. When trouble comes to Red Hollow, Silas steps out from where he hides. He walks into her classroom, takes off his hat, and says something that changes everything. Out here, there's no time for playing around, just the truth. His truth is simple. He wants her heart tonight. What happens when a guy who forgot how to be kind meets a woman who forgot how to trust? Hey, tell us where you're joining us from. If you like this story, hit that subscribe button, because I've got something cool saved for you tomorrow. The morning sun made long shadows on Red Hollow's dusty main street, coloring the old shops in warm yellow and orange. It was the kind of light that made even this rough town look pretty, but most folks here were too busy staying alive to notice beauty. They were just trying to get by. Miss Lillian Grace stood by the window of the little schoolhouse, watching the town wake up slowly, like people who knew not to rush and waste energy. Her fingers touched the worn leather cover of her husband's Bible, something she always carried. A beat-up reminder of faith tested by sadness and being alone. She read it so much the pages were soft, especially the parts about finding comfort when you're sad. At 28, Lillian had felt more sadness than some people do in their whole lives. The war took her husband Thomas before they hit their second wedding anniversary, leaving her with just memories and a little money that brought her to this tough place. She hoped moving far away would make her heart hurt less, but some pain follows you no matter where you go. The schoolhouse door squeaked as young Billy Harmon pushed it open, his freckled face already dusty from walking across town. At 8, he was one of her best students, but life out here made kids grow up too fast. "Morning, Miss Grace," he said, putting his old schoolbook on the desk by the window. "Ma says a new preacher's coming next week. Says maybe you'll have someone nice to talk to." Lillian smiled, but it didn't feel real. Most folks in town were okay, but they thought she should get married again and stop teaching kids so much book stuff. They thought her smarts were weird, and that a woman her age shouldn't be on her own. "Your mom's real sweet, Billy," she said, setting up her lessons. "But I get plenty of good talks right here with you kids." Billy grinned and sat down as other kids came in. There was Sarah, the mayor's daughter, who wore fancy dresses and acted proper. Little Tom Martinez, whose dad worked in the silver mine and spoke mostly Spanish at home, and quiet Emma, whose mom died last winter, leaving her to help with her 3 younger siblings. Each kid had a story that could make you cry, but Lillian saw how strong they were instead of their struggles. They were growing up fast in this tough place, but she wanted to give them more than just surviving. She wanted to give them hope, maybe even dreams of places beyond Red Hollow's dusty streets. As the kids started their morning lessons, Lillian's eyes wandered out the schoolhouse windows to the big land outside. The ground stretched forever toward far-off mountains, colored in brown and gold that changed with the clouds. It was pretty in a rough way, but it made her feel alone. The next. Big Town was 2 days away on horseback, and sometimes Lillian felt like she was teaching at the edge of the world. She'd been in Red Hollow for 8 months. Long enough to know how the town worked and who was who. There was Mayor Cartwright, a nice guy who worried a lot about the town looking good. His wife Eleanor, who ran the women's group and knew everyone's business like a detective. Dr. Benjamin Hayes, who was kind and one of the few people Lillian really trusted. Jack Morrison, who owned the Lucky Dollar Saloon and was gruff but fair to everyone. The blacksmith, Old Pete, who told stories about the old days that kept folks listening for hours, and Martha Williams, who ran the general store and seemed to know everything happening within 50 miles. But there was one man she didn't see much who stayed in her thoughts too often, Silas Wade. Just thinking his name made her heart do a funny flip she tried to ignore. Everyone in town had stories about him, how he fought in the war, in battles people only whispered about. How he came back to find his family's ranch ruined and built it back up with hard work. How he lived alone now, only coming to town when he had to, talking to few and trusting even fewer. She'd seen him maybe a dozen times since she got to Red Hollow, always from far away. He was just like people said, tall enough to make other men look small, with broad shoulders that showed he worked hard. His dark hair was usually under a worn hat, but she'd seen bits of gray that made him seem older than his strong body, maybe 35 or so. His eyes were what got her most. Even from across the street, she could feel them when they looked her way. Smart, full of pain and something else, like he saw everything and never forgot a thing. The kids told stories about him, too, like kids do when they sense grown-up secrets. They said he could follow a trail over solid rock, that he never missed with his gun, that he'd killed more men than anyone around. But they also said he once carried a hurt horse 3 miles to save it, and he quietly paid Dr. Hayes to help the Martinez family when Tom's dad got hurt in the mine. Lillian tried not to think about him, but it was hard when his ranch was on the way to her little rented cabin. Sometimes, when the wind was right, she heard sounds from his place, the clang of a hammer, the moo of cows, his dog barking. Normal sounds that felt special because they came from him. She'd caught him watching her twice. Once, when she was walking home from the store, arms full of groceries, she looked up and saw him sitting still on his horse on a hill. He was too far to see his face, but his stillness made her heart race. Another time, she was hanging laundry behind her cabin when she saw him riding slowly along the ridge above her valley, still as if he was part of the land itself. Both times, she felt scared, but also something else that made her cheeks warm and her hands shake a little. She told herself it was just nerves from being watched by a man with his reputation. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep and coyotes howled far off, she wondered if it was more than that. People in Red Hollow had mixed feelings about Silas Wade. They respected how strong and tough he was, but they kept their distance. Men nodded to him when he came to town, but nobody really talked to him. Women looked at him with a mix of liking and worry, though Lillian noticed some single ladies tried to get his attention. He never seemed to notice, or if he did, he didn't show it. "Miss Grace," Sarah's voice snapped Lillian back to now. "Are you sick? Your face looks red." Lillian touched her cheek, realizing she'd been daydreaming again, thinking about things a teacher shouldn't during class. The kids were all staring at her, like they did when a story got really good. "I'm okay, dear," she said, moving to the chalkboard with purpose. "Let's start math. Billy, what's 7 times 8? The morning went on with lessons and kids, reciting answers. Lillian liked the routine. It felt safe, and the kids' eager faces and questions made her happy. This was her job now, helping these kids in a tough place with tough people. She was giving them tools to make better lives, whether they stayed in Red Hollow or went somewhere else. But even while teaching letters and numbers, part of her mind kept thinking about Silas Wade. She'd heard his dad's silver watch stopped the moment he died, fighting off raiders at their ranch years ago. It might just be a story, but it felt true to her, like time freezing when you lose someone big. She knew that feeling too well. As afternoon came and the kids got ready to leave, Lillian packed her things to walk home. She always stayed a bit late, partly to plan lessons, partly because her empty cabin felt extra lonely just before sunset. "Have a good night, Miss Grace," Emma said quietly, grabbing her slate and book. "Ma says thanks for the soup you brought yesterday." "You're welcome, dear," Lillian said, touched by the kindness. Little things like that made Red Hollow okay, reminding her that under the town's rough surface were people trying to care for each other. When the last kid left down the dusty street, Lillian locked the schoolhouse and started walking home. The afternoon light was turning golden, the kind that made this place famous for pretty sunsets. She walked slowly, enjoying the cool evening air and the quiet as the day turned to night. Her cabin was in a small valley about a mile from town, close enough to walk to work, but far enough to feel private. It wasn't much, 2 rooms, a little porch, and a small yard for a vegetable garden, but it was hers, and that mattered. As she reached the hill leading to her valley, Lillian stopped to watch the sun dip toward the mountains. The sky was turning orange and pink, and a meadowlark sang somewhere far off. For a moment, holding Thomas's Bible, with the big land spread out in front of her, she felt almost peaceful. Then she saw a horse and rider against the sunset, still as a statue on the ridge above her cabin. Even far away, with the light hiding his face, she knew it was Silas Wade. Something about his shoulders, the way he sat his horse so easily, the calm stillness, that was just him. Her heart beat faster, and she wasn't sure if it was fear or something else. He was too far to seem dangerous, and his posture felt more watchful than scary. But why was he there? What was he looking at? As if he felt her watching, he turned slightly toward her. Even from so far, Lillian felt his eyes on her like a touch. They stayed like that for a long moment, teacher and rancher, far apart, but connected by something neither really understood. Then, with his usual slow grace, Silas tipped his hat, maybe saying hello, turned his horse, and rode off into the shadows. Lillian stood there for a few more minutes, staring at the empty ridge, trying to figure out what just happened. Her hands shook a little, and she realized she wasn't breathing. When she finally let out a breath, it was long and shaky, carrying more than just air. Whatever was going on with her and this mysterious rancher, it was bigger than just curiosity. As she walked down to her cabin, with darkness wrapping around her like a cozy blanket, Lillian wondered if she was ready for what was coming. The wind got stronger as she reached her door, smelling of sage and far-off rain. Somewhere in that wind, she thought she heard her own loneliness talking back to her. But for the first time since coming to Red Hollow, it didn't sound so hopeless. Change was coming to this little corner of the frontier. She could feel it in the air, in the weight of his far-off look, in the way her heart was starting to beat to a rhythm she'd almost forgotten. Whether that change would fix her or break her heart, she'd have to wait and see. A mean letter sat on Lillian's desk like a snake ready to bite, its messy handwriting spelling out words that made her stomach feel cold. She found it that morning, slipped inside her math book, waiting like a nasty surprise. "Teachers who don't know their place don't last long in Red Hollow," it said in scratchy letters. "Stop filling our kids' heads with big ideas. Stop acting like you're better than good folks. Leave town or find out what happens to women who forget where they belong." It wasn't signed, but the paper was cheap, and the ink was from Morrison's store. Someone in Red Hollow, someone she saw every day, maybe even smiled at, wrote those ugly words and snuck them into her classroom. Lillian's hands shook as she read it again, though she already knew every mean word by heart. This wasn't the first sign people didn't like her, but it was the boldest. The whispers had been growing for weeks, ever since she started teaching the kids about places beyond Red Hollow, about books and ideas and dreams bigger than ranching or mining. She thought she was giving them hope. Some people thought it was dangerous. The morning sun came through the schoolhouse windows, making bright patches on the wood floor, but it couldn't warm the cold fear inside her. She folded the letter and put it in her bag, though touching it made her skin crawl. She needed to think about what to do, but her mind was foggy with worry and hurt. The kids would be here soon, excited to learn, and she'd have to smile and teach like nothing was wrong. She'd have to look at their parents at the church social on Sunday and wonder who wrote those words, who wanted her gone so bad they'd threaten her. Billy Harmon came in first, as always, his happy, "Morning, Miss Grace," cutting through her dark thoughts like a ray of sun. "Ma packed extra biscuits. Said you looked too skinny last time she saw you." Lillian managed a smile, though it felt weak. "That's real nice of your mom, Billy. Save one for later. We got a big day." More kids came in, each with their slate and book, each one a little spark of hope in this tough place. Sarah Cartwright showed up with perfect braids, then the Martinez kids, dusty from their long walk from the mining camp. Emma came last, as usual, after helping her younger siblings get ready. Watching them settle in, Lillian felt her strength coming back. These kids needed her and what she could teach them. She wouldn't let a coward's note scare her away. But as the morning went on, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched from all sides. At noon break, when she stepped outside, people stopped talking when she got close and looked away instead of meeting her eyes. The walls around her seemed to grow taller and thicker every day. It was Martha Williams from the store who finally said what everyone was thinking. "Miss Grace," she called, as Lillian passed by after mailing a letter at the territorial office. "Can I talk to you?" Martha was a sturdy woman in her 50s, with gray hair in a tight bun and eyes that saw everything. She'd always been polite to Lillian, but not super friendly. Now her face looked harder. "Sure, Mrs. Williams." "I've heard talk," Martha said straight out, "about what you're teaching those kids. How you're putting ideas in their heads about leaving Red Hollow, like they're too good for the life their parents made here." Lillian's cheeks got hot. "I teach them reading, writing, and math, Mrs. Williams, the same stuff the territory says to teach." "Maybe, but it's not what you teach, it's how you teach it. Making them think they need to go to big cities to be something. Making them ashamed of honest work and simple lives. I'd never, wouldn't you?" Martha's voice got sharp. "My nephew Bobby came home last week talking about how Miss Grace says there's libraries in Denver with more books than you could read in a lifetime. How there's schools back east where folks study just poetry and music. You think that's okay to tell a boy whose dad died in the mine and whose mom washes clothes to feed them?" The words hit Lillian like a punch. She'd mentioned those things, sure, but only to show the kids a bigger world, to give them dreams beyond their small lives. She never meant to make them ashamed of their families. "Mrs. Williams, save it," Martha said, turning away. "Just remember Red Hollow was here before you came, and it'll be here after you're gone. Don't make things harder than they need to be." Lillian stood still on the wooden sidewalk, watching Martha walk away and feeling every curious stare from people passing by. The message was clear. She was an outsider, someone who didn't belong and never would. That evening, walking home in the dim light, Lillian felt more alone than ever since coming to Red Hollow. The mean letter felt like it was burning in her. Bag, and every shadow seemed to hide someone who wanted to hurt her. The big land that once seemed pretty now felt scary and unfriendly. She was so lost in her worried thoughts that she almost didn't see the rider coming from her cabin's direction until he was close enough to see clearly in the fading light. Silas Wade. He rode toward her with the same easy calm she'd seen from far off. But up close, Lillian's heart raced. He was even bigger than she'd thought, over 6 feet tall, even on his horse, with shoulders that stretched his worn shirt and hands that looked strong enough to break anything. But his face held her attention. It was rough, marked by sun and wind and years of hard living, with deep lines around eyes the color of storm clouds. There was gray in his dark hair, like she'd guessed, and a scar from his left temple to his jaw, a mark from some old fight. He stopped his horse about 10 feet away, close enough to talk but not so close to scare her. When he tipped his hat, it was almost fancy, despite his rough look. "Miss Grace," he said, his voice deep and rough like far-off thunder. "Sorry, if I'm bothering you?" Lillian found her voice, though it was quieter than she meant. "Mr. Wade? It's fine." He looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes seeing everything. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle for such a big man. "I couldn't help but notice you look upset tonight. I hope nothing's wrong." His kind words almost made her cry. All day she'd held back tears, staying strong against mean looks and rejection. But this caring from a man she barely knew broke her walls. She started, then stopped, pressing her lips together to keep them from shaking. "It's been a tough day." Silas nodded slowly, like he understood more than she said. "This place can be hard on folks who don't fit what others expect." His words were so right, so exactly how she felt, that Lillian looked at him in surprise. In the dim light, his scarred face seemed almost kind, and she saw he knew what it was like to be an outsider, too. "I try to fit in," she said quietly. "I try to be what they want, but it's never enough. Maybe the problem's not you trying to be something," Silas said. "Maybe it's that you're trying to be something you're not." Before Lillian could answer his surprising wisdom, the sound of fast hoofbeats made them both turn. 3 riders were coming from town, moving quick, kicking up dust in the still evening. Silas changed in a second. His kind look was gone, replaced by a sharp stillness, like a wolf sensing danger. His hand moved a little toward the gun on his hip, and his horse shifted, feeling his tension. "Get behind me," he said quietly, but his voice was hard, no arguing. "What now?" Lillian said. His using her first name shocked her, but his urgency cut through her surprise. She moved fast to stand behind his horse, her heart pounding. The three men stopped in a cloud of dust and jingling spurs. Lillian didn't know them, but their tough faces and the easy way they wore their guns said they weren't local ranchers or miners. These were men who lived by fighting, and the way they looked at Silas said they knew him. "Well, well," said the man in the middle, a skinny guy with a scruffy beard and eyes like hard stones. "If it ain't the famous Silas Wade, heard you were hiding in this nowhere place." "John Johnson," Silas said, his voice flat, no feeling. "Thought you were smart enough to stay in Mexico after Abilene." Johnson's laugh was mean. "Mexico got too hot, thanks to you. Time to settle some old scores." Lillian pressed closer to Silas's horse, trying to understand while fighting panic. These men came for Silas on purpose, meaning this was about his past, not random trouble. "The lady's got nothing to do with this," Silas said, his voice carrying a warning that made Lillian's arms get goosebumps. "Let her go." "Oh, but she does now," Johnson said, showing yellow teeth in a grin. "We heard you like the pretty schoolteacher. Makes her important, don't it?" In that moment, Lillian got it clearly. Her world had changed forever. The mean letter, the town's coldness, her struggle to belong in Red Hollow, it all faded next to the danger these men brought. But more, she realized Silas Wade, the mysterious rancher who watched her from afar, had just made her his responsibility. Something in how he sat his horse, calm but deadly like a hot fire, told her he'd kill or die to keep her safe. The evening that started with a mean note and small-town cruelty had turned into something much scarier. As the three men spread out to surround them, Lillian trusted her life to a man she barely knew, whose past was full of fighting and whose feelings for her were still a mystery. The only thing she knew for sure was that her quiet, lonely life in Red Hollow was gone for good. The tension stretched like a tight rope for what felt like forever, but was probably just seconds. Lillian could hear her heart pounding as the three men moved around her and Silas, their hands resting easy on their guns, like men who'd killed before. Then Silas spoke, his voice strong, like someone used to being listened to. "Johnson, you got about 10 seconds to decide if you're riding away or getting buried in Red Hollow dirt. Either way's fine with me." Johnson's laugh was rough. "Big talk for a guy outnumbered 3-1. "You're counting wrong," Silas said, his tone making Lillian's skin tingle. "There's only one of me, but only one of you. Matters. Your guys are just hired help. They'll run when you fall. Question is, are you fast enough to draw before I shoot you through the heart?" His calm, sure voice was scarier than any threat Lillian ever heard. This wasn't showing off. It was a man talking about fighting and death like it was no big deal, like talking about the weather. For a moment, everything froze. Three bad guys facing one man and a teacher in the fading light. Then Johnson's nerve broke just a little, enough for doubt to show in his eyes. "This ain't over, Wade," he growled, but he was already backing his horse up a step. "Not by a long shot." "It is for tonight," Silas said. "And if I see you near Miss Grace again, it's over for good." Johnson spat in the dirt and turned his horse, his men following after a second's pause. They rode off fast toward the hills, leaving dust and the sound of hooves fading away. Lillian let out a shaky breath she didn't know she was holding. Her knees felt wobbly, and she grabbed Silas's stirrup to stay steady. "You okay?" His voice was back to gentle, like before the danger. "No, I think so," she said, looking up at him, seeing his face clearly now that the fight was over. The hard lines and scar were still there, but his eyes looked softer, almost kind. "Those men," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "They knew you from before." Silas nodded slowly, his gray eyes watching her like he was trying to guess what she thought. "I've made enemies, Miss Grace, more than I like to count. I hope that part of my life was done, but some debts follow you no matter how far you go." "What kind of debts?" For a long moment he didn't answer. When he did, his words carried old pain and regrets. "The kind you pay with blood." Lillian should have been scared by that, should have stepped back from a man who talked so easily about violence. Instead, she moved closer to his horse, drawn by something she couldn't explain. "Why'd you help me?" she asked. "Because you needed it." he said simply. And no woman should face men like that alone. There was a softness in his voice that didn't match his tough look. As if he knew what she was thinking, Silas swung down from his horse with easy grace, standing tall but not scary. "Miss Grace? Lillian," he said, her name sounding warm on his lips. "You need to know something. Those men will come back, and when they do, they won't play fair or care about honor. They'll use anything to hurt me, and they think you care about me," she finished, the idea hitting her. "Don't you know?" he asked softly. "Haven't you felt me watching you these past months?" His words hung there, delicate and important. Lillian's heart raced again, but not from fear. "I felt something," she whispered, "but I didn't dare hope." "Hope for what?" She looked into his scarred face, seeing not the dangerous man who faced down 3 killers, but someone as lonely as her, someone who knew what it was to hurt and try to rebuild. "That someone might see me," she said. "Really see me. Not just the proper teacher or the sad widow, but me." Silas reached up slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted, and touched her cheek with gentle fingers despite their strength. "I see you, Lillian Grace. I've seen you since you got to Red Hollow, walking down that dusty street with your head high and your back straight, acting like you weren't scared to start over in a place that didn't want you." His thumb brushed her cheek and Lillian leaned into his touch, even though part of her said this was crazy. "I've been carving," he said, almost shy. "Little things mostly. Helps me think." From his pocket he pulled out a small wooden rose, carved from cherry wood and polished smooth. Every petal was perfect, made with care by hands that knew both building and breaking. "I made this for you," he said, putting it in her hand. "Been carrying it for weeks, trying to find the courage to give it to you right." Lillian stared at the rose, tears stinging her eyes. It was simple but beautiful, and it meant hours of work, of thinking about her while his hands shaped something lovely. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "But Silas, you don't really know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know you're brave enough to come west alone after losing your husband. I know you're kind enough to bring soup to families who need it. I know you're strong enough to stand up to a town that wants to push you down. And I know you have the prettiest smile I've ever seen, even if you don't use it enough." Tears fell then, rolling down her cheeks as months of loneliness and fear let go. "I'm so tired of being alone," she said. "Tired of acting like I'm okay, like I don't need anyone." "You're not alone anymore," Silas said, so sure she almost believed him. "Not if you don't want to be. But those men, we'll find out what happens when they mess with something I care about," he finished, his voice hard again. "I won't let them hurt you, Lillian. I promise." Looking into his face, seeing his determination and something like love, Lillian made a choice that would have scared her that morning. She stepped closer, feeling the warmth from his big frame, smelling leather and wood smoke on his clothes. "What are you asking me?" she said. "Nothing you're not ready to give," he replied. "But I'm hoping, God, I'm hoping, you'll let me court you proper. Let me show you not all men are mean, that some of us know how to be gentle with special things. The town will talk. Let them talk. They're already talking about us. Might as well give them something good to gossip about." Despite the threats, the danger, the unknown tomorrow, Lillian smiled. A real smile, the kind Silas said she didn't use enough. His eyes lit up when he saw it. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that a lot." Silas smiled back, and it changed his tough face completely. For a second, she saw the man he could have been if life hadn't been so hard, if war and fighting hadn't left such deep marks. "Then let me start by walking you home safe," he said, offering his arm like an old-fashioned gentleman. "A guy should at least make sure his lady doesn't walk alone in the dark." As they walked to her cabin, Silas leading his horse, Lillian's hand in his arm, she felt something she hadn't in months. Hope. The wooden rose was warm in her hand, proof someone saw her value, thought she was worth the effort. Behind them, the last light faded from the sky, and ahead was whatever tomorrow would bring. For the first time since coming to Red Hollow, Lillian wasn't scared of the dark. The blue silk ribbon lay in Lillian's dresser like a piece of her old life, catching the morning light through her cabin windows. She held it, remembering how Thomas bought it for her in St. Louis when they were courting, saying it matched her eyes and made her look like a fairy tale princess. For 2 years, she'd worn black, with plain hairstyles, showing the world she was just a widow full of sadness. The ribbon stayed hidden, too bright and hopeful for her grief. But this morning, 3 days after Silas walked her home and talked about courting her with such kind certainty, Lillian looked at the ribbon differently. She thought of his words about showing her some men could be gentle with precious things, and wondered if it was time to remember she was more than a widow surviving a mean world. The wooden rose sat on her bedside table, glowing warm in the sun. She put it there to see it first thing each morning and last thing at night, a reminder someone thought she was worth such careful work. A soft knock at her door stopped her thoughts. Opening it, she saw Silas on her porch, hat in hand, his scarred face hopeful but unsure. "Miss Grace," he said, then corrected himself. "Lillian, hope I'm not here too early." "Not at all," she said, suddenly aware her hair was still in a braid and her dress was plain gray for chores. "Want some coffee? I was about to make breakfast." "That'd be nice if it's no trouble." She let him inside, noticing how he had to duck under the doorframe. Her cabin felt tiny with him in it, but having someone there was wonderful, breaking the quiet that had been her only friend for so long. "I brought something," Silas said as she got the coffee. "Pot ready." From his saddlebag, he pulled out a cloth package smelling of fresh bread and something sweet. "Mrs. Henderson at the ranch keeps saying I need someone to share her cooking with. Says a man living alone is an insult to good food." Lillian smiled. "Mrs. Henderson's your housekeeper?" "More like the lady who keeps me from starving and stops me from acting like a total fool," Silas said, with real fondness. "She's been with my family since before my dad died, practically raised me as much as my mom did." As they sat at her small table, eating warm biscuits and honey, Lillian studied his face in the morning light. The scar from temple to jaw was clearer now, a jagged line showing he'd survived something bad, but his gray eyes didn't have the hardness she expected from a man with his reputation. "Can I ask how you got that scar?" she said, then blushed. "Sorry, that was rude." "No," Silas said, touching the scar without thinking. "If we're gonna know each other right, you can ask." He stared into his coffee cup for a moment, like the words were hiding there. "It was in the war, at Antietam. A Confederate. Sword got me while I was helping a hurt friend. The guy who did it was younger than me, probably just as scared. I killed him 30 seconds later." His simple, honest words sent a chill through Lillian. This wasn't bragging. It was a truth that shaped him, something he lived with every day. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "I regret the war," Silas said. "I regret boys too young to shave had to die for stuff they didn't really get. But do I regret protecting myself and my friend? No. Some things you do because you have to, not because you want to." Lillian nodded, seeing her own beliefs in his words. Sometimes life gave you impossible choices, and you just did the best you could. "What happened to your friend?" she asked. Silas smiled for the first time since he started talking. "He lived, runs a farm in Kansas now, got 4 kids and a wife who makes the best apple pie around. We write sometimes." "I'm glad," Lillian said, meaning it. In a story full of fighting and hard choices, it was nice to know some efforts to save someone worked. They talked all morning as the sun got higher and the day warmed up. Silas told her about his ranch, the cattle business, and how the land could be kind one year and mean the next. Lillian shared stories about her students, the little wins and daily struggles of teaching kids who'd grow up tough. It was easy in a way she didn't expect, talking with a man she was just getting to know. There were quiet moments, but they weren't awkward, just 2 people okay with not filling every second with words. When the church bells rang for noon, Silas stood up slowly. "I should let you get on with your day," he said. "But I was wondering, would you take a ride with me this afternoon? There's something I want to show you." A ride. Lillian looked at her plain dress, then at the blue ribbon on her dresser. "I'm not sure I'm dressed right for—" "You look perfect," Silas said, so honest she believed him. "It's not far, and I'll have you back before sunset." An hour later, Lillian was on a gentle mare Silas brought for her, the blue ribbon finally in her hair where it belonged. Wearing color again felt strange, almost wrong, but when she saw herself in the mirror, hair soft, ribbon bright against her brown curls, she looked like someone who remembered how to hope. Silas rode beside her on his big bay horse, calm and steady like him. He led her away from town into the hills toward the mountains, following paths only he seemed to know. "Where are we going?" she asked as they climbed a ridge with a big view of the valley below. "You'll see," he said, a smile tugging at his mouth that made her heart skip. They went over the hill and down into a small valley she'd never seen. It was like finding a secret garden, a meadow full of wildflowers with a clear stream sparkling like diamonds in the sun. Cottonwood trees gave shade, and the place felt like it was outside the tough frontier life. "How'd you find this place?" Lillian asked, getting off her horse with Silas's help, looking around in wonder. "My dad brought me here when I was 8, Silas said, his voice soft with memory. "Said every man needs a place to think clear, where the world can't get him. I've been coming here ever since." They walked to the stream, where the water was cold and clear over smooth stones. Lillian dipped her fingers in, amazed at this hidden spot in the rough country. "It's beautiful," she said, "like a dream. I wanted you to see it," Silas said, sitting beside her on the grass. "Wanted you to know that even in a tough place there's spots of peace, places to remember the world isn't all dust and struggle." They sat quietly for a while, listening to the water and the wind in the trees. Lillian felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of stress she'd forgotten wasn't normal. "Silas," she said finally, "those men yesterday, they're coming back, aren't they?" "Yes," he said, no hesitation. "Johnson's the kind who can't let go. He'll be back with more men." "Maybe I should leave Red Hollow," she said quietly. "If I'm gone, they got no reason to—" "No," Silas said, so strong it startled her. "No, Lillian, running won't fix it. Men like Johnson don't forget or forgive. If you run now, you'll be running forever." "Then what do we do?" Silas looked across the meadow, his eyes seeing far off. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with experience. "We stand our ground," he said, "together, 'cause that's what folks do when they find something worth fighting for." His simple words warmed Lillian's heart. She looked at the man beside her, scarred, dangerous, haunted by a rough past, and knew she trusted him completely. More than that, she was starting to care for him in ways that excited and scared her. "Is that what I am?" she asked softly. "Something worth fighting for?" Silas turned to her, and his gray eyes took her breath away. "Lillian Grace," he said, "you're worth fighting the whole world for." Before she could answer, he leaned closer, slow enough she could pull away if she wanted. But she didn't. She wanted to know what it felt like to be kissed by a man who saw her as special, who thought she was worth protecting. His lips were gentle, careful, and she answered with a softness she'd almost forgotten she had. The kiss was quick, but when they pulled apart, Lillian felt her world shift. "I haven't," she started, blushing. "Neither have I," Silas said softly. "Not like this. Not with someone who matters." They talked all afternoon about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, dreams for the future, little bits of life. Lillian laughed for the first time in months. Really laughed at Silas's funny comments about town life and his stories about ranch troubles. As the sun sank, painting the sky gold and pink, they got ready to leave their secret spot. But as Silas helped her onto her horse, Lillian knew something had changed. She wasn't just a lonely widow trying to survive anymore. She was a woman learning to love again, with someone ready to fight for her happiness. The blue ribbon in her hair caught the last sunlight, and for the first time since Thomas died, Lillian felt truly alive. The brass compass was Thomas's, a wedding gift from his dad that he carried through their short marriage and into the war that took him. Now it felt heavy in Lillian's hand as she stood outside Red Hollow's church, watching people leave Sunday service, sneaking looks and whispering. The compass needle pointed north, steady even though her hands shook. She loved how it always knew the right way, no matter how lost you were. Thomas said it was like faith, a sure guide when the path was foggy. She needed that sureness now. With everything in her life, shifting like sand in a storm. "Miss Grace?" Mayor Cartwright came up with his wife Eleanor, both looking like they had bad news. "Can we talk?" Lillian tucked the compass into her bag and stood tall. The blue ribbon in her hair felt like a small rebellion, saying she was done fading into sad, gray widowhood. "Of course, Mayor Cartwright. It's about you and Silas Wade," Eleanor said, loud enough for others to hear. "People are worried, Lillian. They're concerned." "Concerned about what?" "About a teacher hanging out with a man like him," the mayor said, sounding sorry but firm. "Parents expect their teacher to be proper." Lillian's cheeks burned. "Mr. Wade has been nothing but kind and respectful. I don't see how letting him court me is wrong." "Courtship?" Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. "Surely you don't mean—" "I mean I'm a grown woman who can choose who I spend time with," Lillian said, surprised by her own strength. "Mr. Wade is a respected rancher and a war hero. If parents think I'm bad because of who I like, maybe they should check their own biases." The mayor and Eleanor looked at each other, their faces saying a lot. "Lillian," the mayor said carefully, "it's not that simple. The school board wants me to talk to you about keeping proper standards. Are you saying I could lose my job?" "We're asking you to think about the town's good," Eleanor said. "Silas Wade is dangerous, dear. There are stories." "There's always stories," Lillian snapped. "Mostly from folks who've never even talked to him but love to judge." Even as she defended Silas, a tiny voice in her head whispered doubts. The way he handled those 3 men so easily, how he talked about killing like it was nothing, the scar on his face. Was she foolish to trust him so much? "Miss Grace?" Dr. Hayes's kind voice broke through her thoughts. He smiled gently, though he glanced nervously at the mayor and his wife. "Can I walk you home? I got some books you might like." Glad for the escape, Lillian took his offer and let him lead her away from the church steps and judging stairs. They walked quietly until they were far from the crowd. "Thanks," she said finally. "That was getting awkward." "The Cartwrights mean well," Dr. Hayes said kindly. "But they sometimes mix up following rules with being right." "Dr. Hayes, can I ask you something? You've been in Red Hollow a long time. What do you know about Silas Wade's reputation?" The doctor thought for a moment, picking his words. "I know he fought bravely in the war. I know he always pays his debts and keeps his promises. I know when the Henderson family got sick 3 winters ago, he rode through a snowstorm to get me and stayed to help them get better. But I also know he's killed men, Lillian, more than most, probably more than he wants to remember. The question isn't if he's dangerous. He is. The question is if he's dangerous to you. And what do you think?" Dr. Hayes stopped and faced her. "I think that man would burn down half the territory before letting anyone hurt you. The question is, are you ready for what that kind of loyalty might cost?" That night, as Lillian tried to focus on lesson plans in her cabin, she kept thinking about the doctor's words. The brass compass sat open on her table, pointing north, while she felt more lost than ever. A soft knock made her look up. Through the window, she saw Silas's familiar shape, hat in hand, but he looked tenser tonight, more alert. "Evening, Lillian," he said when she opened the door. "Hope I'm not bothering you." "Never," she said, letting him in. "You seem worried about something." Silas sat across from her, his big frame making her furniture look tiny. "I rode to town for supplies today. Heard some interesting talk at Morrison's store. About us, I guess. Mostly about you. Seems folks in Red Hollow think I'm a bad influence on their teacher." Lillian sighed, closing the compass with a click. "Mayor Cartwright talked to me after church. The school board's worried about my reputation." "You having second thoughts?" Silas asked, a hint of worry in his voice. "I don't know," she admitted. "I came here to start over to find peace and purpose. I didn't mean to be town gossip or risk my job." "And you didn't mean to get mixed up with a guy who brings trouble everywhere," he said, pain in his voice. "Silas, maybe they're right," she said. "Maybe you're better off without me." "Don't you dare," she said, surprising them both with her fierceness. "Don't you dare decide that for me." She stood and put her hands on his shoulders, feeling how tense he was. "You think I'm some weak little thing who can't handle gossip? You think I'll fall apart because people don't like me? I think you're the strongest woman I know," Silas said quietly, But I also think you deserve better than what I can give. What you give me, Lillian said, is the first happiness I've felt in 2 years. You make me feel alive again, Silas. Don't take that away because others are scared of what they don't get. Silas covered her hands with his. Those men, Johnson and his crew, they're still out there. Word is they're asking questions, gathering info. This ain't over, Lillian. It's gonna get worse. Then we face it together, she said simply. That's what people do when they care about each other, right? They stand together against whatever comes. You don't get what you're saying. These aren't church ladies talking over tea. These are killers, and they won't think twice about hurting you to get to me. And you won't think twice about protecting me, Lillian said. I see you, Silas. I see how you watch over me, how you put yourself between me and danger. You think I don't notice, but I do. Silas was quiet, his gray eyes searching her face like he was trying to read her soul. This could cost you everything. Your job, your place here, maybe your life. And staying away from you could cost me my happiness, Lillian replied. I've already lost one love to things I couldn't control. I won't lose another to fear. She pulled the brass compass from her pocket and set it on the table. This was my husband's. It always points north, no matter how lost you feel. You're my north now, Silas Wade. You're the direction I want to go, the path I want to follow. If that means facing gossips and killers and anyone else who thinks they can control my happiness, so be it. Silas stared at the compass, then looked at her with an expression that stole her breath. Wonder, gratitude, and something deeper. You're sure about this? He asked. About us. 'Cause once we choose this path, there's no turning back. The people against us will only get tougher. And Johnson, let them come, Lillian said, meaning it. All of them. I've spent 2 years trying to hide, to make myself small so life couldn't hurt me. I'm done hiding, Silas. I'm ready to fight for what matters. Silas stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her so close she could feel his heartbeat. Then we fight, he said quietly. Together, in his arms, feeling safer than she had in years, Lillian knew the compass was right. She'd found her true north, and no one was going to make her change course now. The old photo shook in Silas's hands as he sat across from Lillian in her cabin, the lamplight heavy with memories. 5 young men in Union uniforms smiled from the faded picture, their faces untouched by the awful things they'd soon see, their eyes bright with the confidence of boys who thought war was about glory. That's me, Silas said, pointing to the tall guy in the middle. And those were my brothers, not by blood, but by choice. Lillian leaned closer, looking at the photo carefully. The young Silas looked so different. No scar on his jaw, no gray in his hair, no heavy knowledge in his eyes. He looked like a 20-year-old farm boy who thought he knew what war was. They're all gone, he said quietly. Everyone except me. His words hung there like smoke from a fading fire. Outside, the wind got stronger, rattling the windows and smelling of rain. Lillian put her hand over his, not saying anything, just offering comfort. We called ourselves the Devils. Own, Silas went on, his voice thick with sadness. It was a joke. We were farm boys who'd never been far from home. We thought we were so smart, so unbeatable. He touched the photo's edge gently, despite his rough hands. Jimmy Sullivan there. He was going to be a preacher, could quote the Bible better than anyone, but could drink anyone under the table. He died at Fredericksburg, calling for his mom with his insides spilled out. Lillian squeezed his hand, staying quiet, knowing he needed to tell this, that it had been locked inside too long. Charlie Martinez, see that smile? Could charm me. Anyone or fix any problem with a joke. Lost his legs at Chancellorsville, bled out before we could get him help. Each name added to the sadness he carried, another ghost haunting his nights. Lillian started to understand why he lived alone, why he kept everyone at a distance. How did someone carry so much loss and still care about anything? David Chen, first Chinese-American I met, smartest guy in our group, spoke 4 languages and could figure artillery paths in his head. Took a bullet in the throat at Gettysburg, died trying to tell us something important we never figured out. The photo was getting damp from Silas's fingers, but he couldn't put it down. And Thomas Brennan, my best friend, like a brother, saved my life more times than I can count, always watching my back. He took the sword that gave me this scar, threw himself between me and a Confederate charge 'cause he saw the guy aiming for my heart. "Oh, Silas," Lillian whispered, her eyes wet for men she never knew, but whose deaths shaped the man she was starting to love. "I held him while he died," Silas said. "Took 3 hours, and he was awake for most of it. Made me swear. On my mom's grave, I'd live for all of them, not waste the life they died to save. Is that why you came back here? To keep that promise?" Silas finally looked up from the photo, his gray eyes haunted. "I tried. Built up the ranch, worked the land, told myself I was living a good life, but every morning I woke up knowing I was here and they weren't, and I couldn't figure out why I got to live when better men didn't." "Survivor's guilt," Lillian said softly. "I get it more than you think. Thomas died in a hospital in Virginia while I was safe at home, gardening and teaching. For so long I couldn't understand why he had to die, and I didn't. It felt wrong, unfair, like I should have paid that price." Silas looked at her in the lamplight, seeing the same pain he knew, the hurt of being the one left behind. "How'd you deal with it?" "I'm not sure I have," Lillian admitted. "But I'm learning the point isn't to make peace with it. Maybe it's to live well enough that their sacrifice means something." They sat quietly, the wind outside, and a night bird's call the only sounds. The photo lay between them, connecting their separate sadnesses, their shared understanding of loss. "There's more," Silas said after a while, "about Johnson, and why he's so set on settling scores." Lillian waited, sensing this was the heart of what was eating at him. "After the war, some of us stayed to help rebuild. It was messy. Crooks and liars, freed slaves trying to find their place, Southern families who'd lost everything and blamed everyone else." He ran a hand through his hair, silver catching the light. "Johnson was a Confederate deserter, turned robber and killer. He and his gang were hurting freed slaves and Union supporters in Virginia. The army couldn't catch him. He knew the land too well, had too many helpers. So they sent us. The devil's own? What was left of us? 5 men hunting one of the worst killers around." Silas's jaw tightened. "We tracked him for 3 months. Found his camp in the Blue Ridge Mountains, high where he thought no one could get him." "What happened?" "I killed him," Silas said simply. "Shot him while he was eating breakfast. No warning, no chance. To give up. Coldest thing I ever did, but he deserved it. Killed whole families, burned homes with kids inside. But if he's dead, that wasn't the end. He had a younger brother, Marcus, there that morning, saw me shoot his brother, swore he'd make me pay someday." Lillian's eyes widened as it clicked. "The Johnson who threatened us. Marcus Johnson. After a blood debt from 15 years ago." Silas leaned back, looking older than his years. "Thought he was dead, heard he got killed in a range war in Texas. Guess I heard wrong. And now he's in Red Hollow. Now he's here. And he knows the one thing that had hurt me worse than dying, hurting you." His words sent a chill through her, not from the wind outside. She thought of the mean notes, the cold stares, the feeling of unseen forces against her. How many men does he have? Last count, 8 or 10. Enough to make things tough if they come for us. "Against us," Lillian repeated, liking how natural it sounded. Despite the fear growing in her stomach, she felt strong knowing he included her in the fight. "I could take you away," Silas said suddenly. "Tonight, if we have to. We could go to Denver, San Francisco, anywhere he'd never find us." "Is that what you want?" Silas stared at the photo of his dead friends. "What I want is to keep you safe. What I want is to not worry every second that my past will ruin the best thing in my life. And running would do that? Maybe for a while, but not forever." "No," he admitted. "Probably not forever." Lillian picked up the brass compass, feeling its weight. "My husband said a compass only works if you trust it completely. If you keep doubting it, you'll never get where you're going." "And where are we going?" "Forward," Lillian said simply. "Together, not running from the past, but not letting it control our future either." She stood and put her hands on his shoulders, feeling his tension. "Those men in the photo, your brothers. What would they want for you?" "They'd want me to be happy," Silas said without pausing. "To find someone to love and build something good with whatever time I got left. Then that's what we do. We build something good right here in Red Hollow and fight anyone who tries to take it. Silas pulled her onto his lap, holding her close so she could feel his heartbeat. You know what you're signing up for? This won't be easy. Church socials and picnics. This'll be war, Lillian, ugly and final. I know, she said, but some things are worth fighting for. What we have, what we're building, that's worth any risk. In his arms, with the photo of his lost friends watching, Lillian felt her doubts fade. The path ahead was dangerous, maybe deadly, but it was their path, and she'd walk it with him, compass pointing north until they reached their destination. The hidden land deed crinkled in Lillian's shaking fingers like dry leaves, its faded ink telling a truth that changed everything she thought she knew about her life in Red Hollow. She found it tucked in Thomas's Bible, between the Psalms, like a prayer turned into legal words and seals. Property deed for 640 acres, Section 12, Township 4, North Range 15 West, she read softly. Given to Thomas Alexander Grace, June 15, 1862. Silas stood still in her cabin doorway, hat in hand from his evening visit, his gray eyes locked on the paper that rewrote their stories. Thomas owned land here? He asked, though the IG proof was right there. 640 acres, a whole section. I don't get it, Lillian said, sitting down as the truth hit her. He never said he owned land in Colorado, never mentioned Red Hollow or... She stopped, staring at the deed with growing fear. The silver mine. Section 12 is where they found the silver. The silence was so deep, Lillian heard her own heartbeat. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, smelling of a coming storm. That means, Silas said slowly, you legally own the richest silver mine in the territory. But I don't want it, Lillian said, her voice rising with panic. I didn't even know it existed. Why didn't Thomas tell me? Silas moved to her, his big hands gentle on her shoulders. Maybe he meant to. Maybe he was waiting for the right time. Or maybe he knew it'd be dangerous. Maybe he knew owning that land would make me a target. Lillian finished, the pieces falling into place. Which explains why some folks in Red Hollow hate me so much, Silas said grimly. They've known all along who you are. Lillian's mind raced back through the months since she arrived, seeing every cold look, every whispered talk, every fake smile in a new, scary way. Mayor Cartwright's big worry about her reputation, Martha Williams's sharp words about knowing her place, the school board's sudden care about her behavior. It all made sense now. They've been trying to push me out, she said. Not because I'm new or teaching big ideas, but because I own something they want or are already taking. If they've been mining your land without permission, Silas said, angry, they're stealing, big-time stealing. Lillian paced her small cabin, the deed still in her hands. But how'd they even know about Thomas owning it? These papers should be in Denver with the territorial government. Unless someone local saw them, Silas said. Someone trusted, someone with power. Mayor Cartwright, Lillian said right away. He handles all the official papers. Between Red Hollow and the government. He'd have seen this deed. A loud knock on the door stopped her words. They froze, hearing boots on the porch and the creak of someone shifting weight. Miss Grace, a rough, unfamiliar voice called. I need to talk to you about your husband's land. Silas's hand went to his gun, and he stepped between Lillian and the door. Who's asking? He shouted. Name's Fletcher. Jake Fletcher, the voice replied. I was Thomas Grace's business partner, and I got things his widow needs. To hear. Lillian and Silas looked at each other. She'd never heard Thomas mention a Fletcher, but then he never mentioned owning land here either. How do we know you're telling the truth? Silas asked. I got papers to prove it, Fletcher said. And if you don't let me in, the folks mining that silver illegally for 2 years will make sure you both don't see morning. The blunt threat hung heavy. After a moment, Silas opened the door, keeping his hand near his gun. Jake Fletcher was a small, wiry man in his 60s with thin gray hair and sharp eyes. His clothes were worn but nice, and he carried a heavy leather bag full of papers. Mrs. Grace, he said, taking off his hat respectfully. Sorry for your loss. Thomas was a good man, a fair partner. Partner in what? Lillian asked, still holding the deed. Fletcher glanced at Silas, then back at her. In buying land for minerals, we got land all over the territory, hoping to strike it rich when miners came. Most were worthless, but Section 12, that was our big win. He opened his bag and pulled out a stack of papers. Letters between him and Thomas, reports, legal, agreements, everything to prove her ownership and the money she was owed. Money owed? Lillian's voice was faint. Ma'am, that mine's made over $200,000 in silver the past 2 years. You're owed 20% of it by our deal with the mining commission. The numbers were huge, $40,000, enough to live comfortably forever or build any future she wanted. But if Thomas and I owned the land, she said, why didn't anyone tell me when they started mining? Fletcher's face got serious. Because some folks in Red Hollow hid your ownership and kept the money. They told the mining company the land was the town's, with Mayor Cartwright as the boss. That's fraud, Silas said flatly. Big-time theft. And now that Mrs. Grace is here asking questions and getting close to you, Fletcher said, looking at Silas, they're nervous. Nervous enough to do something permanent. You mean they want to kill me? They already tried through others. Those mean notes, the town's hate, it was all planned to scare you off. When that didn't work, they hired Johnson and his men to make it look like a personal fight. The truth hit Lillian hard. She thought the town's dislike was about her being different. She never thought it was about money. Tons of money she didn't even know she had. Johnson isn't here for revenge, she said slowly. He's here because someone paid him to get rid of me. And me, Silas added. Once they saw I was protecting you, I became a problem too. Fletcher nodded. They planned to make it look like Johnson killed you both for revenge, then vanished to Mexico. Clean and simple, no one left to ask about mineral rights or missing money. Except you, Lillian said. Except me, which is why I rode 3 days straight to get here. Thomas made me promise to look after you if anything happened to him. I'm late, but I'm here now. Lillian sat down, overwhelmed. She wasn't just a lonely widow starting over. She was a rich woman whose existence threatened a big scam involving Red Hollow's leaders. What do? She asked. We expose them, Fletcher said simply. All of them. I got enough proof to take down Cartwright and everyone else stealing. But first we got to keep you alive to see justice. Johnson and his men are camped 5 miles north, Fletcher said. Word is they're moving tonight. Silas grabbed his gun belt. Then we don't have much time. Time for what? Lillian asked. To make our stand, Silas said, his voice full of determination. To fight for what's ours and end this for good. As if on cue, hoofbeats came through the cabin walls, lots of horses coming fast toward her valley. Looks like they didn't wait, Fletcher said, checking his gun. Lillian stood, the deed still in her hands. But how'd they even know about Thomas owning it? These papers should be in Denver with the territorial government. Unless someone local saw them, Silas said. Someone trusted, someone with power. Mayor Cartwright, Lillian said right away. He handles all the official papers between Red Hollow and the government. He'd have seen this deed. A loud knock on the door stopped her words. They froze, hearing boots on the porch and the creak of someone shifting. Wait. Miss Grace, a rough, unfamiliar voice called. I need to talk to you about your husband's land. Silas's hand went to his gun, and he stepped between Lillian and the door. Who's asking? He shouted. Name's Fletcher. Jake Fletcher, the voice replied. I was Thomas Grace's business partner, and I got things his widow needs. To hear. Lillian and Silas looked at each other. She'd never heard Thomas mention a Fletcher, but then he never mentioned owning land here either. How do we know you're telling the truth? Silas asked. I got papers to prove it, Fletcher said. And if you don't let me in, the folks mining that silver illegally for 2 years will make sure you both don't see morning. The blunt threat hung heavy. After a moment, Silas opened the door, keeping his hand near his gun. Jake Fletcher was a small, wiry man in his 60s with thin gray hair and sharp eyes. His clothes were worn but nice, and he carried a heavy leather bag full of papers. Mrs. Grace, he said, taking off his hat respectfully. Sorry for your loss. Thomas was a good man, a fair partner. Partner in what? Lillian asked. still holding the deed. Fletcher glanced at Silas, then back at her. In buying land for minerals. We got land all over the territory, hoping to strike it rich when miners came. Most were worthless, but Section 12, that was our big win. He opened his bag and pulled out a stack of papers, letters between him and Thomas, reports, legal, agreements, everything to prove her ownership and the money she was owed. Money owed? Lillian's voice was faint. Ma'am, that mine's made over $200,000 in silver the past 2 years. You're owed 20% of it by our deal with the mining commission. The numbers were huge. $40,000, enough to live comfortably forever or build any future she wanted. But if Thomas and I owned the land, she said, why didn't anyone tell me when they started mining? Fletcher's face got serious. Because some folks in Red Hollow hid your ownership and kept the money. They told the mining company the land was the town's with Mayor Cartwright as the boss. That's fraud, Silas said flatly. Big-time theft. And now that Mrs. Grace is here asking questions and getting close to you, Fletcher said, looking at Silas. They're nervous enough to do something permanent. You mean they want to kill me? They already tried through others. Those mean notes, the town's hate. It was all planned to scare you off. When that didn't work, they hired Johnson and his men to make it look like a personal fight. The truth hit Lillian hard. She thought the town's dislike was about her being different. She never thought it was about money. Tons of money she didn't even know she had. Johnson isn't here for revenge, she said slowly. He's here because someone paid him to get rid of me. And me, Silas added. Once they saw I was protecting you, I became a problem too. Fletcher nodded. They planned to make it look like Johnson killed you both for revenge. Then vanished to Mexico. Clean and simple, no one left to ask about mineral rights or missing money. Except you, Lillian said. Except me, which is why I rode 3 days straight to get here. Thomas made me promise to look after you if anything happened to him. I'm late, but I'm here now. Lillian sat down, overwhelmed. She wasn't just a lonely widow starting over. She was a rich woman whose existence threatened a big scam involving Red Hollow's leaders. What do we do? She asked. We expose them, Fletcher said simply. All of them. I got enough proof to take down Cartwright and everyone else stealing, but first we gotta keep you alive to see justice. Johnson and his men are camped 5 miles north, Fletcher said. Word is they're moving tonight. Silas grabbed his gun belt. Then we don't have much time. Time for what? Lillian asked. To make our stand, Silas said, his voice full of determination. To fight for what's ours and end this for good. As if on cue, hoofbeats came through the cabin walls. Lots of horses coming fast toward her valley. Looks like they didn't wait, Fletcher said, checking his gun. Lillian stood, the deed still in her hands, and looked out the window. She saw torches flickering in the dark, Johnson and his men coming to finish what they started. But, as she watched, something new rose in her chest. Not just fear, but anger, hot and fierce at the people who stole from her, lied to her, and tried to take her home. They wanted a fight? She'd give them one. Silas, she said, turning from the window with fire in her eyes, those guns in your saddlebags, are they loaded? Yes, but Lillian, good, she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. I'm done running and being scared. That's my land they're stealing, my money they're taking, my life they're trying to ruin. She folded the deed and tucked it close to her heart. Time to take back what's mine. The twin Colt revolvers felt heavy in Silas's hands as he checked them for the 3rd time, their steel shining cold in the lamplight. These weren't rancher guns or fancy showpieces. They were made for war, built to kill. I haven't carried these since Appomattox, he said quietly, his fingers moving over them like he'd never stopped. Thought I'd never need them again. Lillian watched him, memorizing every detail. The way his scarred hands handled the guns with ease, the hard set of his jaw, the calm that settled over him like a heavy cloak. This was the real Silas Wade, under all his control, a man shaped by fighting, sharpened by war, and deadly when protecting what he loved. Outside, the sound of riders got louder. Fletcher crouched by the window, peeking through the curtains at the torches moving like evil stars. 8 men, maybe 9, he said. They're spreading out, surrounding the cabin. Johnson's no dummy, Silas said, sliding the Colts into his holsters. He knows I'm tough up close. He'll try to make us come out, fight on his terms. What about the townsfolk? Lillian asked. They won't just let armed men attack, will they? They're probably hiding behind locked doors, hoping this passes without touching them, Fletcher said bitterly. And the ones not hiding, Cartwright and his friends, are likely watching from far off, waiting to see if their hired killers fix their problem. Lillian felt angry, thinking of Mayor Cartwright safe in his big house, while men with guns came to kill her. All those months trying to fit in, to make them like me, and they were plotting against me from the start. There's something you need to know, she said suddenly, pulling the brass compass from her bag. Before all this, before I knew about the land or money, I made a choice. I chose you, Silas. I chose us. She pressed the compass into his hands, feeling his warm fingers. Thomas carried this through the war. It brought him home to me once. Maybe it'll bring you back to me tonight. Silas stared at the compass, its needle steady despite his shaking hands. Lillian, I love you, she said simply. I should have said it before, but I was scared of getting hurt again, of losing someone I care about. But watching, you get ready to risk your life for mine. I need you to know. The words hung between them like a bridge over their fears. Silas looked up, and what she saw in his eyes, love, determination, and almost peace, took her breath away. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with feeling. Since the first day I saw you walking into that schoolhouse head high, heart open, you gave me a reason to believe in tomorrow. Fletcher cleared his throat. Hate to break this up, but they're getting closer. We need a plan. Silas tucked the compass into his pocket, over his heart, and focused on the fight. The cabin's strong, but only for a bit. They'll try to burn us out if they can't rush us. There's a root cellar, Lillian said, behind the cabin. Maybe 20 yards? It's got a solid door and stone walls. Too obvious, Silas said, shaking his head. First place they'll look after torching the cabin. What about the old mine shaft? Fletcher suggested. The played-out claim half a mile east. It's got lots of entrances and twists to confuse anyone who doesn't know it. Also too obvious, Silas said. Johnson's done his research. He'll know about big landmarks. A new sound came through the walls, leather creaking, spurs jingling as men got off their horses and moved on foot. The torches stopped, forming a circle around the valley. They're ready, Fletcher whispered. Whatever we're doing, it's now or never. Silas was quiet, his gray eyes far off, thinking through angles and odds. When he spoke, his voice was sure, like a man used to making life or death calls. Fletcher, can you handle a rifle? Well enough. There's a Winchester in my saddlebag with ammo. Take the back window. You'll have a clear shot toward the creek. Don't shoot unless you must. But if anyone sneaks behind us, stop them! Fletcher nodded and grabbed the rifle. What about me? Lillian asked. Silas looked at her, torn between keeping her safe and trusting her. Can you shoot? Thomas taught me. I'm not fast, but I'm good at close range. There's a Derringer in my left saddlebag. 2 shots, but they hit hard if someone gets past me. He paused, his face softening. Lillian promised me something. If this goes bad, if they get through, use that last bullet on yourself, rather. Then let them take you alive. The harsh truth hit her hard, but she understood. Men like Johnson didn't take prisoners, especially not women who could be used against Silas. I promise, she said, meaning it. All right. Silas moved to the front window, looking at the torches marking the enemy. Johnson, he called out, his voice clear in the night. I know you're there. Let's talk. A mean laugh came from the dark. Nothing to talk about, Wade. You know what I want. I know what you're paid to want, Silas replied. Question is, are you sure your bosses will pay up? I got info about their money troubles that might change your mind. There was a pause, long enough for doubt to creep in. Then Johnson's voice came back, harder. Nice try, but I got half the money already, half when it's done. And what happens when the territorial marshal asks about 2 dead bodies in a mining accident? You think Cartwright will back you when the government comes knocking? Another pause, longer. Lillian could almost hear Johnson thinking. You're bluffing, he said, but he sounded less sure. Am I? Fletcher, tell him about those papers you got. Fletcher moved to the window and shouted, "I got sworn statements from 3 mining engineers Johnson, plus letters proving Mayor Cartwright and his pals been stealing from Mrs. Grace for 2 years. Kill her now. You're not just killing a teacher. You're killing the main witness in a federal fraud case." The silence was heavy, broken only by the wind and a night bird. Lillian held her breath, hoping Johnson might back off. Then she heard the sound she feared. Rifle bolts clicking, boots scraping as men took cover. "Sorry, Wade," Johnson called, his voice final like a judge. "But I got a reputation to keep. Can't let folks think I quit a job just 'cause it's tricky." "Then we do this the hard way," Silas said, his voice cold, ready to fight or die. Lillian moved to his side, the derringer heavy in her hand, looking at the torches of men who wanted her dead. In minutes, her quiet valley would be a battlefield, and her life in Red Hollow would end in gunfire and blood. But standing by the man she loved, feeling his strength, Lillian wasn't scared anymore. She was angry, furious at the greed and lies that brought them here. "Silas," she said quietly, "when this is over, when we win, what then?" He looked at her, his scarred face softening with hope. "Then we build something better together, on your land, with your money, in a town that learns to respect what we've done. And if we don't win, then we'll die fighting for something that mattered," he said simply. And that's more than most folks can say. The first gunshot broke the night like shattering glass, and the fight for Lillian's future began for real. The wedding ring slid off Lillian's finger easily, like it knew this moment ended one part of her life and started another. She knelt by her small garden, the soft dirt under her knees, and pressed the gold band into the soil where she'd planted Thomas's favorite roses. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered, tears running down her face as gunfire roared around. The cabin. "Thank you for bringing me here, for giving me a chance to be happy again." The ring sank into the earth like a seed for a new future, and Lillian felt something tight in her chest let go after 2 years. She wasn't just Thomas, Grace's widow, defined by loss. She was Lillian, a woman full of love, anger, and strength. A bullet broke the window above her, glass falling like sharp rain. She rolled away and crawled back to the cabin, where Silas was shooting back with steady aim. "Lillian!" His voice cut through the noise as she slipped in the back door. "You hurt?" "No," she gasped, brushing dirt and glass off her dress. "But they're getting closer. I saw 3 men by the creek bed." Fletcher's rifle fired from the back window, followed by a cry outside. "Got one," he called, "but more are coming." Silas appeared beside her, his gray eyes sharp with battle focus. "They're trying to rush us," he said. "Johnson's impatient, thinks he can overwhelm us before we make them pay too much." "Is he right?" "Depends on how much fight we got," Silas said, then smiled, a hard, dangerous smile that showed how tough he could be. "And I got plenty left." The front door burst open as 2 of Johnson's men charged in, guns firing. Silas moved, fast, his Colts appearing like magic. The first man fell before taking 3 steps, Silas's bullet hitting his chest. The second got off 1 wild shot before Silas's other gun fired, spinning him into the wall. In the sudden quiet, Lillian's heart pounded and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. "That's 2 down," Fletcher called. "But they'll try again. Johnson don't give up easy." As if he heard, Johnson's voice came through the night. "Wade, you're just stalling. Send out the woman, and we'll make it quick for you both." "Counteroffer," Silas yelled, reloading his guns fast. "You and your boys ride out now, and maybe some of you see sunrise." Johnson's laugh was nasty. Big talk from a guy trapped with nowhere to go. "Who says I'm running?" Silas said, his voice chilling Lillian's blood. "Maybe it's time I bring the fight to you." "Silas, no," she said, grabbing his arm. "There's too many, and they expect us to stay here and let them pick us off," he said. "Sometimes the best way to defend is to attack." He moved to the front door, but instead of going out, he kicked through the back walls thin boards and vanished into the night. For a scary moment, Lillian was alone with Fletcher and the dead men's bodies, listening to gunfire and wondering if Silas would come back alive. Then she heard his Colts firing fast, followed by screams of surprise and pain. "He's behind," "Them?" Fletcher said, almost impressed. "That crazy guy circled around and got behind their line." The fight outside got wilder as Johnson's plan fell apart. Men closing in on the cabin were now caught between Fletcher's rifle and Silas's deadly shots from behind. Lillian crept to the broken window, trying to spot Silas in the chaos of shadows and gunfire. She saw him roll behind a log, his Colt firing as he took on two men trying to get around him. One got close, rushing him, but Silas seemed to know without looking. He spun and shot in one smooth move, dropping the man before he got halfway. "That's how you do it!" Fletcher cheered like it was the old days. But even as hope grew, Lillian saw the odds were still bad. Silas was amazing, a warrior in his element, but he was outnumbered, and Johnson was smart enough to know he could win by dragging it out. "Wade," Johnson's voice rang out. "You're good, I'll give you that, but you can't be everywhere." As he spoke, Lillian saw two men creeping along the cabin's side, planning to break in while Silas was busy. Without thinking, she grabbed the Derringer and moved to the side window. The men were close now, near enough to see their faces in the torchlight. She recognized one, Pete Morrison, the store owner who was always nice to her face, but plotting her death behind her back. The betrayal hurt, but it made her stronger. When Morrison reached for the window latch, Lillian was ready. She pressed the Derringer's barrel.